Your phone just buzzed. You carefully swipe down from the top of your screen to read the message straight from the notification bar. You make absolutely sure your finger does not accidentally tap it. You leave it sitting there on unread for 3 whole days, even though you know exactly what it says. If this highly specific behavior and that anxious inner voice just caught you off guard, then congratulations. You are not broken or defective. Your brain is just operating in a much more sophisticated way. This behavior is not a flaw, but rather a survival mechanism. It is a clear sign of a complex and delicate brain trying to protect itself. You are not alone in this, and today we are going to unpack the exact neuroscience behind why you hide from your own inbox. You tell yourself a very familiar, comforting lie. You say, I am just going to reply later tonight when I actually have the mental space to sit down and write a proper response, because you genuinely care. Right? You do not want to just fire off a quick, dry thumbs up emoji or a lifeless okay. You want to give them your full attention. But then tonight slowly turns into tomorrow morning morphs into the weekend, and suddenly that tiny little notification icon transforms into a heavy ticking time bomb sitting right there on your home screen. Then the familiar guilt sets in. It creeps up on you while you are doing the dishes or staring at the ceiling trying to fall asleep. You start writing a completely different narrative about who you are. You label yourself a bad friend. You convince yourself you are a terrible networker, a massive disappointment, or some sort of digital ghost who just vanishes the second someone tries to reach out and connect. You might even actively avoid watching their Instagram or Facebook stories because, heaven forbid, they see your name in the viewer list while their message is still sitting in your inbox collecting dust. It is incredibly exhausting, isn't it? You are walking around all day carrying this invisible, heavy backpack filled with unreplied texts, unread emails, and mounting social obligations. You look around at your colleagues or your friends who seem to effortlessly fire off replies within seconds, and you cannot help but wonder what exactly is wrong with you. Why does this simple, hey, how are you doing, feel like an insurmountable mountain? You sit there marinating in this quiet shame, suffering from your own overthinking, convinced that you are just fundamentally broken when it comes to basic everyday communication. But if you think this is just a case of simple social awkwardness or run-of-the-mill anxiety, hold on, because that is not the strangest part of this whole equation. What is actually happening inside your brain at that exact second is a profoundly fascinating mechanism. To understand this, we need to step out of the realm of self-blame and step into the world of behavioral psychology. When you look at that unread message, you are not actually reacting to the friend, the family member, or the colleague who sent it. You are reacting to the invisible heavy weight of the expectation that is attached to it. In the fields of neuroscience and behavioral psychology, there's a framework for understanding this physical resistance. It circles around a concept known as demand anxiety, which is often associated with a broader behavioral profile called pathological demand avoidance, or PDA for short. Now, do not let the heavy clinical sound of the word pathological scare you or make you feel alienated. We are going to look at this through a lens of extreme empathy. Let's break this complex neurological response down into something deeply relatable. Imagine your brain is like a highly advanced computer, or more specifically, a web browser. Every single morning when you wake up, you start opening tabs. You have a massive energy-draining tab open for your career. You have tabs open for your financial worries, your family obligations, the errands you need to run, and maybe a few tabs permanently frozen on some awkward interactions you had 3 years ago. You have dozens of background applications running simultaneously. Your working memory, which acts like your brain's RAM, is being pushed to its absolute maximum limit. Your internal cooling fan is whirring loudly, your system is overheating, and you are just barely keeping the whole operation from crashing. Then out of nowhere, your phone vibrates. A brand new notification slides down into view. To your conscious, logical mind, it is just a harmless message. Maybe it is your best friend sharing a funny meme, or an acquaintance asking a simple question. But to your nervous system, which is already running at 99% capacity, that tiny little text message is not just text. It is a brand new, heavy software program trying to launch. It is a demand. It is the outside world knocking on your door, asking for a piece of your focus, your time, and your emotional energy. When your nervous system registers this incoming demand, your brain's threat detection center, the amygdala, steps in. It perceives this sudden request as a direct threat to your already exhausted system. It literally triggers a micro-level fight or flight response. That physical tightness you feel in your chest when you see the notification, that is your biology trying to protect you. So, When you swipe away that notification without opening it, your brain is simply hitting the emergency abort button to prevent a total system failure. But what exactly makes the physical act of opening that app so terrifying? Why does simply tapping the screen feel like you are stepping onto a battlefield? If you think this is just about avoiding the person, let's go a little deeper. Because the real villain here is not your friend, and it is certainly not your lack of willpower. The real villain is a tiny, seemingly innocent piece of code built into almost every modern platform, the read receipt. To understand why your brain physically recoils from opening the app, we need to examine the psychological weight of this feature. In the landscape of modern digital culture, a read receipt is no longer just a neutral technological function. It has evolved into a binding, implicit social contract. When you tap that notification and that little scene indicator or those two blue check marks appear on the sender screen, you have officially signed that contract. The terms of this invisible agreement are incredibly strict. It essentially says, I acknowledge that I have received your data, I have processed your request, and I now owe you a timely, adequate, and emotionally engaged response. The clock starts ticking the exact millisecond those pixels change color. The buffer zone is completely obliterated. In the past, human communication naturally had built-in delays. You wrote a letter, you left a voicemail, and there was a grace period where you could simply exist without owing anyone your immediate energy. Today, technology has completely erased that grace period, but our evolutionary biology has not caught up. Our brains were never designed to be universally accessible 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. When you open that message, you are not just consuming information. You are triggering a massive spike in cortisol, the stress hormone. Your brain knows that if you leave them on read without replying, you are violating that social contract. And to our primal brains, violating a social contract means risking social rejection, which historically meant isolation and danger. So when you carefully pull down the notification bar to read the text in secret, you are doing something incredibly brilliant. You are hacking the system. You are finding a loophole in the digital matrix. By reading the message without triggering the read receipt, you are gathering the necessary social intelligence. You now know if it is an emergency or just a harmless meme. And you do this without legally signing the contract that demands your immediate cognitive labor. You are buying yourself time. You are artificially reconstructing the natural communication buffer that modern technology stole from you. Let's take this one step further. If you have been chronically beating yourself up, lying awake at night, thinking this avoidance makes you a cold, distant, or inherently bad person, I need you to pay very close attention to what I'm about to say next, because this is where the science gets incredibly validating. When you leave that message on unread, your brain is not rejecting the person on the other side of the screen. Let me repeat that, because your guilt desperately needs to hear it. You are not rejecting your friend, your partner, or your colleague. You are simply rejecting the immediate manufactured timeline. You're engaging in a highly necessary protective act of cognitive triage. In psychology, we talk extensively about a concept called emotional bandwidth. Think of your emotional bandwidth like a finite daily allowance of energy. From the exact moment you wake up, you are spending this invisible currency. You spend it on making complex decisions at work, navigating frustrating traffic, managing your facial expressions, and filtering out the relentless sensory noise of the modern world. For highly sensitive individuals and chronic overthinkers, the cost of these everyday social transactions is significantly higher. Your brain processes every single micro interaction so deeply and so thoroughly that by the time evening rolls around, your emotional bank account is completely overdrawn. You're bankrupt. You're practically running on fumes. So when that message suddenly comes in, your brain rapidly runs a subconscious calculation. It assesses the exact amount of energy required to formulate a sincere, thoughtful, and engaged response. And because you are someone who deeply cares, you do not just fire back the first thoughtless thing that comes to mind. You draft it in your head. You revise it. You obsess over how your tone might be perceived, and you worry about keeping the conversation flowing. You actually care too much. When your prefrontal cortex, the logical part of your brain, realizes that it simply does not have the necessary energetic funds to cover the high cost of that empathy right now, it forces you to retreat. It pulls the plug to protect you. Leaving that message hovering quietly in the notification bar is not an act of malice. It is your neurological system's desperate way of saying, I value this human connection way too much to give it a half-hearted, exhausted, and empty response. I need to recharge my internal battery before I can show up for them properly. It is not laziness. It is an unconscious boundary deeply disguised as procrastination. You are fiercely guarding the very last drops of your emotional bandwidth so that you do not completely shatter. So, Let us completely flip the script on this entire narrative. I want you to take all that guilt, all that shame, and all those labels about being a terrible, avoidant friend and throw them straight out the window. Because what if I told you that reading a message from the notification bar is not a toxic trait at all? What if instead it is actually a highly evolved, brilliant, modern survival mechanism? We are currently living in a historical anomaly. For the very first time in human evolution, we are existing in a society that demands 24/7, unrestricted access to your energy. The smartphone in your pocket has created an incredibly dangerous illusion that you must always be on, always available, and always ready to perform socially. But your deep intuitive brain knows better. When you purposely leave that message on unread, you're doing something incredibly powerful. You're implicitly establishing a firm boundary in a world that is actively trying to demolish all of them. Think about the fundamental design of those messaging applications. The bright red notification badges, the sharp buzzing, the scene indicators, these were all intentionally engineered by behavioral scientists to hijack your dopamine system and create a false sense of absolute urgency. They're specifically designed to make you feel like every single text is a life or death emergency that requires your immediate compliance. But by refusing to open the app, by carefully reading the text from the drop-down menu and putting your phone right back in your pocket, you are staging a quiet neurological rebellion. You are actively resisting the tyranny of instant accessibility. You're taking back the steering wheel of your own attention span. You are not ghosting anyone. You are simply declaring on a subconscious level that your time and your psychological peace belong to you, not to the digital matrix. You are carefully curating your availability to survive the modern age. By forcing that buffer zone into existence, you are saying, I will consume this information on my own terms, and I will respond when I have the capacity to be genuinely present. That is not the behavior of a broken, antisocial, or inadequate person. That is the behavior of someone who is fiercely protecting their mental sanctuary. You have essentially built an invisible moat around your energy reserves, allowing you to peek over the castle walls, assess the social situation, and decide exactly when you want to lower the drawbridge. So please take a deep breath and let go of the heavy expectation that you have to be instantly available to everyone all the time. You are completely allowed to consume information on your own terms, in your own time, and within the limits of your own emotional capacity. Needing 48 hours to reply to a text message does not mean you are a cold, uncaring, or detached person. In fact, it usually means the exact opposite. It means you are the kind of person who respects your relationships enough to want to give them a real, thoughtful, and genuine response, rather than just a rushed, mechanical reaction fueled by panic. You are honoring the connection by waiting until you have the emotional funds to properly invest in it. I want you to remember that your worth as a friend, a partner, or a human being is not measured by your response time on a screen. The people who truly understand you, the ones who actually deserve access to your energy, will never penalize you for taking the time you need to recharge your batteries. They will understand that when you finally do lower that drawbridge and send that message back, it is coming from a place of genuine care, not just a frantic desire to clear a notification badge. You are not broken for needing space. Your mind is beautifully complex, deeply sensitive, and trying its absolute best to navigate a loud, demanding world with grace. You do not owe the digital world your immediate presence, but you do owe yourself the permission to rest, to step back, and to simply exist without feeling guilty about it. So, if you are sitting there right now with 47 unread messages, quietly waiting in your inbox, and you finally feel just a little bit lighter hearing this, then you belong right here. You do not need to fix yourself because you are not broken. If this video just put into words exactly what you have been feeling, please consider subscribing to the channel. This is a safe space for us to decode our beautifully complex minds together without any judgment. Take care of your energy, and I will see you in the next one.